There are a lot of churches who operate in a fear-based culture.
From the pulpit down.
Yeah.
From the pulpit down.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get into that in a few minutes.
Is that not normal? Like, isn't that just humans, right? Or is there something unique to the church?
I think it depends on how aware of it you are.
I think it is just humans to a degree, but it's also because it's the organization. Like, I have a different, like, I don't know. I have a different way that I approach people in my life that are maybe positionally in authority.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I would respect, your parents, but only because they have age and experience and other kinds of authority in my life, but I don't work for them. I'm not in it. But so I'm not afraid to have a conversation. If we had relationship, I wouldn't be afraid to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But there are some people, young people on a church staff, who just, their fear of failure, their fear of not getting to a bar, their fear of not excelling to a certain degree, even if it's imagined, creates this, we assume that senior pastor is going to feel this way about something, so we have to put everything in place. Every system that we have needs to be put in place to avoid that result. Yeah. And they don't even know if he would react that way.
Yeah.
They're just afraid that he might, or assuming that he would.
Yeah.
Or, and so it's like, we've got systems, what are we going to do? Like, there's a book on what happens.
Yeah.
He's got 2 mics, 2 elements.
Yeah.
And if there's a failure, like, there's no way to know if it's the mic, the cable, the connector, or the pack.
Yeah.
But just in case,
here's a completely redundant.
We're going to replace it all.
Yeah.
We're not just going to walk on stage and give them a handheld.
Yeah.
So now we've got these layers of procedure in place that complicate the whole process.
Yeah.
When it could just be, give the guy a handheld for 5 minutes because he's almost done with the talk, and he'd probably be okay.
Yeah.
But because there's this fear that's been put in place, there's then also these layers of process that are completely unnecessary, expensive, redundant.
Not even saying it's him that put the culture of fear in.
That's what I mean by awareness, is that a lot of those things are well-intentioned.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it's you're completely misreading the situation, and then you end up with these things that are costing you time and money for no reason at all.
Because then you have some new staff member who's 5 layers removed from the actual authority, may not even ever meet the person, but they're told by their peers and those directly above them that this is how we do things because, and then they instill this sort of myth. There's this mythology that surrounds the whole structure sometimes that's like, I don't think that's actually true. Oh yeah.
Yeah, knowing that so there are people on your team who are assuming things about you.
Yeah.
And which happens anyways, but
that becomes a part of your culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can become cancerous.
Yeah.
Very much so.
100%.
Totally.
Wow.
So that's not what we came here to the episode today to talk about, but we might get there eventually. Welcome to the MxU Podcast. For those of you who haven't joined us before, my name's Jeff Sandstrom. I'm kind of our host of this conversation.
Legacy member.
That's right.
Uncle Jeff.
I'm joined by Spencer DeYoung, Nate Ellis, and golly, I don't remember your last name.
Lance Asher.
Lance
It's okay,
Asher.
though.
It's all right. We can keep that rolling too.
No, we're not.
I'm not stressed about it.
We're gonna.
His glasses.
I dropped
It's
my
right
glasses.
there, but he wasn't wearing his sunglasses. He was wearing his glasses.
You got to make it bigger. You got to make it bigger. I can't see that. We're not gonna. We are gonna.
We just
edit
brought
that.
Lance on to get to know him, so it's okay. You could have said, "What's your name, by the way?
Yeah,
Who are you?"
Sorry, Lance Asher is
Totally
here.
fine.
He's a worship leader at a local church here in Knoxville.
That is correct.
And we came here to talk some
Yeah.
about worship teams.
Yeah.
Because we're really excited
Yep.
that just a few days ago, as of July 1st, we have content on the MxU platform for not just production teams,
Yep.
but worship teams as well, because we've said for years that worship and production is actually one team.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we're putting our money where our mouth is by actually creating and producing and collaborating on content that is designed for serving both teams.
Letting somebody in this building who dresses a little bit nicer than the average tech guy.
Well, or different.
You know, Lance came rolling through the door. He had his wardrobe. He had everything.
He had the drip.
He was locked and loaded.
He had the drip.
And in that moment, I was like, I might need to revisit some things.
Marcus told me, you're going to be on camera. Come with the drip. I brought options. I didn't know what the drip was
Options
necessarily.
are good.
I like that.
And I ended up bundled up in a hoodie and jeans
it's cold in
because
here.
I get cold easily though. So this is how I roll.
It's
all
100
year
degrees
long.
outside, but it's not 100 degrees in here.
No, it feels great.
Whereas Spencer has worn on the last 3 episodes 3 different colors of the same T-shirt.
Same Carhartt shirt. Yeah, well, that's
that's because your wife shops for you now.
Yeah, that's true. My wife, she just goes and picks up a new Carhartt color for me, and it's like Christmas.
That's good, Bob.
If it ain't broke, man.
Yeah, exactly. But
if it works,
I don't know. I might revisit some things. I was talking to Lance about this while we were making some coffee, and I was like, because typically we're always kind of in the production world, in the production community, it's hard to get church tech guys to come on the podcast because they don't always like talking.
It's true.
But
I've always described them as a cohort of nerdy introverts.
And we're a part of that. So
that's very eloquent language for that. I like that.
But we're a part of it. So then now that we're again trying to bring everybody together, I'm like, hey, there are some people who I think would want to come talk to some nerdy introverts. Yeah. So Lance jumped into that, which is cool.
I'm very honored. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, tell us, just so every listeners, and I mean, frankly, we don't know you that well. So it'd be awesome for you to just help us understand just a little bit of what, I don't know, the last 10, 15, I don't know how old you are, 20 years has looked like for you in ministry and where you come from and whatever you care to share.
Absolutely. So I just turned 30 this year.
Sick.
So nice. I'm rocking into a new decade. I just had my second kid. So I've got a 2.5-year-old little girl and a 6-week-old son. Nice. So I'm also very sleepy.
We were in the NICU at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
That's crazy.
Didn't even know it.
We didn't cross paths, but both of our kids were in the NICU at the same time. And
so
now
your
they're
two
both
kids are really
well.
almost exactly the same age as your second and third.
Second, third, yeah.
And same.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So wild, man.
Nate has 3 kids too. So.
Yeah, my second and third.
Respect. I think 2's a good number for us. We'll see.
No zone defense for your team.
That's cool. You guys are cool.
Yeah. Clip this and put it on Instagram for me so I can tag my wife. But no, I've actually been really fortunate to have grown up here in Knoxville. So I'm born and raised here. All my family on both sides is from Kentucky. So I'm a huge Kentucky sports fan. Basketball is like the big thing.
De'Aaron Fox, let's go, baby.
Yeah.
So that's right. I love it.
And Malik Monk. Let's go.
Big time. So we got a lot of
no football. So you came here for football.
Less football. I mean, we got like a couple of guys.
Will Levis.
Will Levis is playing. He's playing.
Well, it depends if you're a UK fan or a Louisville fan, I guess.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, we don't. Louisville fans, that's a whole different ball game. No red in my house. Not a lot of orange either. It's all blue. But I know that's not what we're here to talk about. But
that's all right.
We can talk about sports. It's fine.
Jeff, wow,
we added some blue.
Who put that up there?
I did.
You did. Hey, I was about to say Jeff's a Michigan fan, but you couldn't tell by the room.
Yeah,
and I looked up.
So we've got
right
go
there.
blue and go big blue. We can live with that.
But they are national champs.
Yeah, we are kind of
for now.
For now.
For a few months.
Yeah. Well, enjoy it. I don't know if it was earned totally, but
oh, come on.
I'm just kidding. I promise.
I love that.
No, but back to Jesus and church and stuff. No, like I said, I've grown up here in Knoxville. I went to Grace Christian Academy, which is a Christian school here in the area. I went there for
all. Where your kids go?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Two are in preschool.
Let's go. So. I was there for preschool. I was there for kindergarten all the way through graduated high school there. I went all 12 years. And while I was there, that's where I was kind of able to start learning what church world was like. Because the school was a part of a church, there was a lot of crossover with the people who were connected to both of those things. And so when I was in high school, me and a couple of friends had an idea to start our own class, essentially, that we called Worship Arts Class. And we pitched it to some of our teachers. And eventually they, for some reason, let us do that.
Nice.
And so that was like my sophomore year of high school. And so a lot of my friends that I actually did that with in high school are still serving in ministry today, which is really cool. So that's where it all started for me, really. I started taking guitar lessons just kind of on a whim when I was in middle school. And so all of those things sort of culminated into in high school. I got the chance to start leading worship for some things at my school. And eventually got to know, some other people in Knoxville who were doing that at other churches. And so I got connected to a church plant, a new church plant in Knoxville when I think I was 16. I started serving there as a bass player. That was like my first time serving in a church plant or doing anything like that. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, a relatively bigger one, especially for the area. And so totally different vibe for me. I walked in and they were doing a series at the time that I think was called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. So I was
at the Southern Baptist church.
No, sorry. This is at the church plant that I went to visit after being raised in a Southern Baptist church. And I was like, okay, this is a departure from what I'm used to.
Yeah.
But I was
Did they record that?
I'm pretty sure they played a Paramore cover around that same time. And I was like, this is super cool. So, I immediately was captivated by that. And in a way that I hadn't been, but I'd always loved music. So all of those things just sort of fell into place. And eventually I felt like God was leading me to try doing some ministry in my 20s. And so I fished around in college for a little while, trying to figure out how exactly to get into that path. And I ended up on staff at Faith Promise Church, which is another local church here in the area. And that was my first real church job. And I'm so grateful for it. Even now, it was a very safe place for me to fail. And anybody that I worked with there would attest that there were moments where that happened.
Yeah.
But man, I could never get away from what music and Jesus did when people came together for it. And I never wanted to miss a moment of that. So as cheesy as that sounds, that's as honest as I can be, that all of those things just kept falling into place. And so now I've been serving as the associate worship pastor at Foothills Church, which is based in Maryville, for a little over 5 years now, which is wild. So, and we have a multi-site location here in Knoxville. That's where I spend most of my Sundays. But I spend most of my time during the week at our Maryville location.
Okay, so that's cool.
That's really cool. The long and short of it.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hit it.
And maybe you guys, we can all speak into this because I think there are a lot of people who are young in church who maybe have a similar story of, hey, I grew up in this environment, went to school in a Christian school, really liked music, started playing in my church, and there's this, you talked about, you felt like God was leading you toward, but there's some people who they kind of fall into playing, they end up continuing to play, and then that just becomes their thing, as opposed to a calling from God to be a worship pastor.
Totally.
So what's the difference? Because I think there are some people who are maybe, I don't want to preach, but maybe riding a kind of dangerous line of it being a gig instead of it being something that God has called them to.
Yeah.
And so I just want to, as we start to talk about worship and the worship and production, because I think there's some production people who fall into that as well. Yeah. They got hired because of a certain skill or a certain experience level, and now all of a sudden they're being asked to lead a team or disciple people, and their response is, well, that's not what I've really set out to do.
Right.
I'm a good IT guy, or I'm a really talented systems person, or I like to mix. Now you're wanting me to do all this? And so, I'm not saying that the calling is an obligation to be able to serve, because I don't believe that it is.
I agree.
But as a leader, you felt like God had called you to this. So let's just maybe unpack that a little bit to give some advice, or maybe, it's not a word of warning. It's just it's easy to fall into, this is just a gig.
Absolutely, it is.
And I think that's part of what we've been feeling internally that is problematic in the modern American evangelical church.
Yeah. When you add on the meaning of labels and terms and words too, you just mentioned sometimes a production director at any given church is going to be tasked to pour into and lead and develop typically things that would be on a pastor's job description.
Right.
But that title is, in my experience, has been offered less to production staff than anybody else in the church world for whatever reason. So it's an interesting game, but I guess I can only speak to my own experience really as far as the calling, but I think the best way I've heard it explained for myself was that there is a difference between your calling and your assignment. And so I guess I gained some clarity in my calling being using music as an avenue to connect others to Jesus.
Yeah.
And that being broad is okay with me. My assignment, I was never 100% really sure about. Even when I was in college, I was like, I don't know if I want to be a worship pastor. It kind of depends on the church too. I mean, what a worship pastor is at one church is not the same at the other church. And so I eventually just kind of arrived at like, I wanted to be faithful with what God placed in my hand. And so when I had the opportunity to go work at Faith Promise, it was a little scary because at the time I was just working at a movie theater, on minimum wage just to try and pay my parents back some money for bills and stuff. And it was a contract job at the time. It was only 10 hours a week. I mean, I'm saying all this like, not as it was a bad thing. It was a really great opportunity for me, but I still had to jump a little bit. And I was like, God, are you calling me to be like a worship pastor? And eventually I guess the word worship pastor started to mean less to me. And so over time, it just became like, I know my calling is to use music in this way. And my assignment in this season of my life is actually to be an associate worship pastor, which is not a common title, I'll concede. But it's been an amazing experience because I'm not the guy who's driving the bus, so to speak, for our worship ministry, but I am very much in a supportive role.
Yeah.
And that's actually where I really feel like God has uniquely designed me to operate, is to be in a supportive role and to help do, sometimes it's more of the boots on the ground things and sometimes it's not. It just depends. And so I'm trying to be faithful with what God's put in my hands, and that's kind of where I leave it. And I think for some people, the labels and the titles, it gets so trippy. If you're God, I just want to be a worship pastor so bad. And God's like, here's this opportunity right here. And you're not going to have the title of pastor, but there's nothing stopping you from pastoring people. You don't need the word pastor in your title to do that. And so
on the other hand, the Bible is pretty clear that to some he made pastors, some he made leaders, some he made teachers. So there is, and so it's not just semantics, but some of it is. It's like,
that's a good way to put it.
From a pastoral standpoint, Nate, what's your take on that?
Well, I'll speak a little bit to my experience. As first, I think we need to understand, like, because a lot of times I think we hear the word purpose and calling intertwined, and they are, in my opinion, two very different things. Like, your purpose as a believer, as a Christian, is to go and make disciples of all nations, right? Great Commission, Matthew 18, 28 through 30. I'm not going to spout out the whole thing right here. I could if I would, but I'm not.
You won't.
Could if he would, but he can't.
He thought about it.
I'm kidding. Go.
And so that is our purpose, to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name. By the way. Yeah, didn't I say Matthew 28?
You said Matthew 18.
You said Matthew 18, which I was like, are we talking about accountability up in here?
But it's verses 18 through 20. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you to.
You made him do it.
Yeah.
You made him do it.
I stopped halfway through, but it's fine.
He could quote the whole gospel of Matthew.
He could.
And then our calling, I think, calling is a hard one that I have struggled with. Not because I don't believe God calls people to certain things. I believe he does, and he gifts people with certain giftings and abilities. However, I think sometimes in church, and I've done it myself, I have used the word calling to maybe get out of a thing or two.
Oh yeah.
God has called me to this when
but he hasn't called me to this.
He didn't really call me from that. It was more so I wanted to get out, and I kind of felt like I had this little inkling, and so I used God called me to leave the situation. God called me to leave this. When really, if I look back, especially early on in ministry, God didn't call me from that. He was actually challenging me to step up and do the hard thing, but I was scared and I was fearful. Yeah. And so then I went and did something else. And so sometimes I think we can weaponize the word calling to get out of get out of situations. But personally, I grew up in church, and I also I started playing worship music, and I drum. That's kind of predominantly my first instrument, and but I also had a super heart and passion for students and for people. And so I remember I was interning at a church, and I sat down with a campus pastor who would later become my boss. And he was like, Nate, where do you see yourself in 10 years? You're really great at the worship stuff, but I can also see you've got passions for students and youth. And so where do you see yourself in 10 years? And I looked at him and I thought about it, and I was like, I see myself with people. And at the time it was students. And then 10 years later, I was still doing student ministry. And so not that I think God was calling me to students or calling me to worship. I think he gave me the opportunity to choose.
Oh, yeah.
And so I pursued it, and I still have a huge passion for worship. And I've, as a student pastor, I would lead worship from time to time when a worship leader came out sick, or student drummer had a test, whatever the situation, I would step in and drum, whatever. I would use that gift, talent, and ability that God gave me. But I think sometimes you just have to choose, like,
that's good.
And be faithful to wherever God has put you. Yeah. And well,
I think your use of the word assignment, I think, is a good one.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what I've been assigned to do.
Yeah.
I feel like it is from God. Mm-hmm. And for now, maybe for forever, this is my assignment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kind of, there was a season of my life where I got really caught up in trying to figure out what's the will of God. Mm-hmm. What is he? And I would kind of, all these words, I think you're really right, Lance. Like, sometimes we can really confuse what these words mean for us. And there was a study that I went through that kind of changed my perspective on the whole thing of, like, honestly, God just wants you to walk in his ways and walk with him.
Yeah.
That's his will.
Yeah.
Like, right. What is he? Sometimes our human nature, like, we try to make things really complex and go, like, there's got to be this really big, sexy thing that, like, God has for me. And it's like, first, just like, why don't you really dedicate yourself to walking in his ways?
Yeah.
And that's a challenge in enough. And you're saying go and make disciples. Like, if we die having done that, like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it's an interesting one. But we in the church, I think you're right, Nate. It can be, some of these words can be taken out of context or maybe abused at times.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I've done that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
God's calling me to this or that. God's calling me to get a raise, or whatever.
I haven't tried that one yet.
God just told me you need to give me a raise. No, I didn't do that. But
is that what a word of knowledge means?
Yeah.
I'm like,
I got a word for you, brother boss.
I get it. Brother boss.
Brother boss. Anyways, and we do this thing on the podcast, like a service review segment where churches will submit a recording, basically, of their live stream. Or weekend experience, and ask for our feedback.
I love it.
We should have had you guys submit something. It'd been fun to watch what you guys do over at Foothills.
There's no video evidence of our multi-site location.
You're like, and I want it that way.
No. But no, we should do that. That'd be fun.
So we've got a church submitted by Justin Rand, the Summit Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he's wanting some feedback on his mix. Gear-wise, he's using a CL5 in conjunction with Wave Super Rack. He also tracks everything to Pro Tools through Dante to make more polished mixes for our social media, is what he said. So,
but I think what we're watching is not the Pro Tools edit.
Correct.
We're watching the live stream.
This is the live stream.
Yeah. Oops. And let's
take a look.
Take a look at it. Jeff, I'm curious to get your thoughts first.
I think it's always hard when we do these.
Yeah.
Because so much of it is really good. Like I'm trying to go, okay, what would I criticize?
What would you make better?
Yeah, what would you make better? Yeah. But I will talk about what's good or what I like.
Yeah.
I think there's a good balance of, a lot of times you watch somebody's live stream and it's mostly drums and vocal.
Yeah.
I think there is a good balance of the band coming around the drums, which is cool. But as far as the drums, I would say I could use some more snare drum.
Yeah.
I want the snare drum to be kind of driving the band, especially as those builds happen. Like when they come back into the chorus, I want the drums to kind of be like, here's the new moment. Yeah. Like there's this simmer, this bridge, and all of a sudden we're back to the chorus. And the issue, not the issue, but the opportunity is vocally, because it's a female-led song, the person who was leading the bridge has kind of taken off and done some ad-libs in her higher register. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then when the chorus comes back in, it's a female low register. Yeah. So it's low for a female. And so all the more reason for the energy not to have to come from just the vocal.
Yeah. Yep.
The vocal was really present and she sang really well, but it's like, where's what's going to drive that moment?
Yeah.
So I would say,
do you think it was just volume of snare or just overall kit sound,
tonality?
Yeah. What?
We'd have to go back and listen. I mean, I think I prefer, just me personally, there's a lot of opinions on snare drum. Yeah. I prefer a snare drum with a little more crack.
Yeah.
A little more top end, a little more like it can sit right behind the vocal and still be like, that not the super dark, tubby kind of tuned low snare drum. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But sense. There's a way to make that work too. Yeah. Obviously, a lot of people do. But I just prefer drums that are a little more driving. I feel like it gives a little more impact if they're a little more hi-fi.
Yeah.
Even the toms, I feel like during that bridge section, the toms, if they were brighter, could have a little more pop to them.
Yeah.
It was like I could hear them, but I didn't feel them.
Yeah.
I want to feel it.
And it's hard, people, especially in AirPods, computer speakers, soundbar, iPhone, like you don't know what people are listening on.
Totally.
Yeah. So I'm sure that's why he goes back and sweetens things for social media because you want it to translate.
Which is great.
And
awesome.
I think that's great, but they're also having to translate in real time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say as a way to sort of, test that, let's record something, maybe even go back to this and listen to it on each of those delivery systems and see how it translates so that you can maybe tweak your front of house mix or however you're sending your mix to broadcast, make those tweaks so it doesn't totally disrupt what's happening in the room, but it's maybe a balance, especially if your mix is coming from front of house.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to hear what you think from a worship leader perspective, Lance, but quickly I would say too, it felt like the vocals and the band were like, they might, if I close my eyes, I envision them almost being in separate rooms. Like there just was not a whole lot of like this with the band and the vocals.
Yeah.
And it was kind of strange. Like even like the background vocal, like coming through in a way that felt really unnatural, and super dry. And then there was elements of the band that was wetter. It just, it felt like they were in different places almost.
Yeah. There's a ton of reverb on the guitar tones.
Yeah.
Ton of like space and sort of, not reverb, but the pad sounds had that sort of space to them.
Yeah.
The vocals needed to be in more of a space.
Yeah. 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 What thoughts came to your mind, Lance?
Yeah, So I'm certainly not any kind of mixing engineer.
And you don't need to provide like trade. You can talk about worship leading anything.
What I would say, what I saw a lot of things that I really liked because I to me that looked like a worship team that knew what they were doing and weren't thinking about it. Like I could tell that a lot of the people on that stage were engaged in worshiping and in leading worship without having to think really hard. Especially the worship leaders. I think most of the camera shots of the musicians were either a little further away or like, the keys, like hands, like I can't see him, but just seemed like they knew what they were doing, which I love. I feel like you can, when you listen to a band, you can tell how they rehearsed or if they rehearsed, to an extent. They seemed like they were confident in what was going on in the room, which is cool. I thought for the production value of the room, everything looked pretty solid on camera. I didn't see anything that was like crazy distracting.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't listen to a lot of broadcast mixes unless I go on YouTube and it's like, Elevation and Bethel and those guys. So hearing this, I'm like, it's actually really cool that I can hear all of the vocalists. Like, I like that. Like, I'm glad that because I know how hard these people work to like show up and sing, melody for 5 songs. And then you can go back and be like, I did it. Like I was there for this moment. And I think that it was cool to be able to see that translate on camera as well. So I love it. That's
also,
cool.
of all the times I've heard Come Rest on Us, I had never heard that tag like that before. So I thought that was unique.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little, just the You're All We Want tag.
You're right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that. I like that.
I have a question for you.
Hit it.
How do you talk to your team about stage presence?
Ooh, that's great.
Because I'm not saying this about their mix. It just occurred to me as I'm watching them, because you made the comment that they looked like they were worshiping, they were engaged.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look at people's live streams and I look at the lyrics that they're singing, and it's like, you're singing this.
Yeah.
You should tell your face that this is what these words are.
Yes.
Because they're not, and so sometimes
the joy of the Lord is my strength.
That's right.
Well,
the joy
sometimes
of the
it's
Lord.
the inverse though too. Sometimes people are like
doing
too all over the
Yeah.
place talking about the blood of Jesus,
Talking about the
and I'm
ashes
like,
Relax.
like why are you
Relax.
so happy right now?
So how do you communicate those things to your team?
That's a great question. I my MO for stage presence conversations is always going to try and be person to person.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of nuance to how everyone physically embodies what they're doing. And so not everybody's going to have the same level of expression in their movement and in their language, but there is a certain I don't want to use the word minimum because that feels like the wrong term, but there's a goal, at least for all of my volunteers, or anybody, for myself too, of making sure that my body and my face is translating what we're singing about, like you just said. And so that doesn't always mean I'm going to be jumping around and doing backflips, but it does mean that like my countenance should be like uplifting. Like
you're at least engaged in what you're trying to communicate.
Exactly. And so I think a lot of times people don't realize too, like you're especially when you're wearing in-ears, which most of us are doing all the time, you're so focused on how you sound that you totally lose concept of how you look. And now that can be a double-edged sword as well. You spend too much time thinking about how you look, you're barking up the wrong tree. But it's not how you look, like the clothes you're wearing. It's the presence that you're portraying, your aura or whatever. You know, like you should be able to tell that you are captivated or at least in touch with what you're singing about, right? And so,
well, it definitely doesn't need to be manufactured, but it should be an overflow.
Yes.
Of what's already happening in your heart. Like,
absolutely.
I've talked to worship leaders a lot who talk about trying to instill in their team that this is not, like, this stage is not the only time you should be worshiping.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This needs to be an expression of what's already happening
100%
in your bedroom or your prayer closet or whatever you do. It's like the reason I want to sing this is because it's in me.
Absolutely. Not to lead the witness either, but I would say the same for songwriting. That would be my exact words. That's exactly where it comes from. So
we are going to get
cool.
there.
We're going to get there in a minute. But
prayer closet. Do you have a prayer closet?
I don't, but I know people who do, actually.
I've never
It's an old word, but
yeah, is it?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't really know what that's like, but I want to see one now.
Well, like, when Jesus talks about praying, he's like, go alone by yourself, go into your room. It's a personal thing.
Yeah, I know some people who have kind of like prayer rooms and such, which I wish I had enough rooms in my house to have one, because that would actually be awesome.
Yeah. I actually know somebody who they built they had a little room with a door on it that was kind of a storage place underneath a stairwell that came down in their house.
Like Harry Potter.
Yeah, well, not like a entrance to Never Neverland, but it's just
that closet was an entrance to nowhere. They were trapping
it. That's true. But anyway, they turned that into the place where they did their quiet time. So they would
Yeah.
That's cool.
Maybe it just forced them to kneel. I don't know.
Maybe their kids, maybe they were just hiding from their
trying to
kids.
get away from their family.
Just trying to find some time with the Lord.
That's funny.
Leave me alone, kids.
Well, we're going to talk about that posture about songwriting in a few minutes, but I do want to say to everybody watching and listening that tomorrow we have a batch of content releasing that I personally am super excited about.
Yeah.
So we recorded some courses with my buddy Matt Gilder, who is Chris Tomlin's music director. And this course that's coming out tomorrow is all about music directing with Matt Gilder. So it is so good.
I'm smiling because even thinking about Matt, he is just the most joy-filled dude.
He is one of the just genuinely nicest, friendliest, coolest people you'll ever meet.
He came into our space and I hadn't met him before, and we were just kind of like when you came in, we were just kind of shooting the breeze, like making some coffee, and he was just talking about life, and I'm just like, this dude just made me so much happier.
Yeah, I like this guy.
And he's really funny. And,
I love that.
And kind of a wizard.
He
is a wizard.
Speaking of Harry Potter.
Yeah, no joke. Like dude knows what he's doing.
Yeah, well, he's an incredible piano player. He's an incredible worship leader through his instrument, but also just how he manages Ableton and transitions and all the things that it takes to be a person who MDs from keys.
Yeah.
You're going to learn so much. I can't wait for you to check it out.
Yeah. He was Tomlin's like OG MD from day one almost?
Since 2006. So 18 years.
He's played How Great Is Our God a lot.
A lot of times. Thousands of times. Yeah. But he's
still a banger.
Still a banger.
He's one of the best
Never
humans.
stops.
Yeah.
I fully intend on watching that stuff. I'm super excited about that. That's
Sick.
cool.
Yeah. So if you're an MxU subscriber, you'll get the email tomorrow and just click the link and you'll go right to it. If you're not, it's a good reason to be a subscriber. So go to getmxu.com and check it out.
Cut that one up. Get that one out on the internets. Oh man. Well, to the main event.
Yeah, let's have a meaty conversation, as if we haven't already.
I was going to say, this is kind of turning into a mega episode.
We've really stayed like right there in the thick of it. I love it.
Yeah. So, full transparency, you probably haven't listened to the MxU podcast much in the past, Lance, but this format for us is a bit new. Like I think it's only been a month or two that we've been doing video podcasts in person.
Yeah.
Which has been really cool because I think the richness of the conversation has been really, really good. But there's some conversation. So I'm setting the table of the conversation we're about to have, and I gave you some of a heads up. We're all going to have some different perspectives here, which I think is really great. And even over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about some challenging topics that it's really easy to opt in to just be agreeable, right? But as we're still getting to know each other, and I just want you to know, man, we might disagree on some stuff here, which I think will be pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it.
And learn. My hope, my personal hope is honestly just to gain more clarity and learn more.
Same.
And so we're talking about songwriting, and the question is, should churches be writing their own songs? Right? Is that kind of the question here?
I think so, yeah.
And you do a fair amount of songwriting. I'd love to know, just first and foremost, what does songwriting look like for you guys at Foothills? What have you done before that? When did you become passionate about songwriting? All that good stuff.
Totally. I remember writing my first song somewhere when I was like 8th grade, I think. And the only reason I remember it is because the only way I knew how to write something was to just copy what I already knew. So the melody of the song that I wrote was ripped from a song that it completely existed. The chord structures and stuff I tried to put together, I ripped from a Beatles song. And I just remember trying to put this thing together. I wrote it down in a notebook that I still have. And I was just so happy about man, I just wrote this song, it's the worst thing that I'm glad no one's ever heard it, but I just
we should play it.
Yeah, you should have brought it, bro.
Oh my gosh. If I could remember more than 3 seconds of it, I promise
we have a guitar.
Let me come back on the next episode and I'll give it to you.
Work up a little
service
ditty.
review, but song review.
But I really had nobody in my family was musically inclined, at least by trade. My parents casually liked some music, mostly rock and roll and classic stuff, and then a lot of the CCM stuff that we all grew up listening to. So I had like everything from like bands like Chicago and REO Speedwagon and Aerosmith all the way to like Jeremy Camp. I mean, and everything in between. So nice. I just became interested at some point in trying to learn how those things worked, and not with any particular pursuit in mind. I wasn't one of those kids who was like, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. I was like, I had no plan. I just suddenly liked to write things down. And so it became, I guess looking back on it now, I realized it was God helping me learn some more healthy and therapeutic practices for getting stuff out of my heart, so to speak. Because my dad passed away when I was really young. I was 10 years old when he passed away from cancer. And so I harbored a lot of things from that I didn't know how to express and deal with. And I, tried different forms of counseling and things, and never really found any kind of healthy outlet for that stuff until God led me into writing songs. And so that was kind of the first nut to crack, so to speak, for me, of learning that I think my primary method of communication, I think I'm bold enough to say that, with God is music. There's just something about that connection that so speaks to me personally that I've never been able to get away from or turn off. So going back to the high school thing I talked about when we had that worship arts class, one of the things that we did for that was to plan our weekly chapel services for our school. And within that, we were actually encouraged to write songs as early as that. And we had no, concept of how to write a good song. I had no frame of reference, nothing. And so I had nothing other than the belief of other people around me, which was immense. And so we just started doing that. And so I think that around like the time I went to college is when I really was like writing a lot. I wasn't just writing worship songs. I was writing other stuff too, and just I love emo music. It's like my heart and soul. I grew up with Blink-182 and pop punk and things like that. And so I wrote a lot of things like that too. I started bands with my friends and, played shows at places I wasn't old enough to be in, downtown Knoxville and stuff like that. And all of that wrapped into also writing songs about Jesus. And so
just getting ready for that Paramore opener.
Dude, as soon as I found that, I was like, this is it. This is home for me. So all of that just sort of congealed into a desire to create music. And so now, I'm very, very hesitant to call myself a songwriter. That feels really weird to say.
Why?
I don't know, man. Imposter syndrome. I'm not sure. I'm not. It feels, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I have a weird thing about titles. It just feels like when does a songwriter call themselves that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's okay for me to think about like Bob Dylan and say he's a songwriter, but like when did Bob Dylan call himself that? I don't know. This feels a little bit sideways to the conversation, but
no,
it's my own, what's the word? Insecurity about it. I don't know, but where I'm insecure in calling myself that, I'm confident in the fact that I can't stop doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I've gone from just having like an empty sort of canvas of creating songs to now having a space where I get to be the lead producer for our worship team, or for our, what we call Foothills Collective. Yeah. And so I'm super green to that world as well of producing, and I'm learning on the fly with a lot of that. But my first love, there's something about writing songs down and transcribing mostly personal experiences or personal things that you begin to know or understand about God, or things that he reveals to you. When you start to discover that other people can connect to those things as well, or and vice versa, like, you may jump into a co-write with somebody who's going through something, and you get to write a song with them that no one may ever hear, but it meant something to them to write that song. Like, that's just as valuable to me as a gold record. Like that, there's no way, there's no other place where you can recreate that, at least in my life, in my experience. And so, I sort of fell into it, as honest as I can be. I didn't have anybody around me who was like a songwriter, and I just sort of happened to have the right people around me to guide me to this point. And so I've been fighting for opportunities to write songs in the churches that I've been a part of. And I've had different levels of times where that was well or times where it was encouraged and times where it wasn't. I've had times where, I was writing songs even though I knew nobody would hear them. And there's been times where I'm writing songs thinking like, oh gosh, people are going to hear this, now that I've had both and so, I've by no means arrived, but gosh, do I love creating songs that the church can sing. And particularly my own church. That's a huge blessing that I don't take for granted. So, to how we do it specifically, I don't know for sure yet. Yeah. I've been there for 5 years and we're still kind of ironing out like what kind of process we have. But the core, at least at the moment, is me and my worship pastor and my lead pastor. The three of us write together at least 4 to 6 times a year, which to some people may sound like an insane amount, and to some people that's all. So you got everything in between. But in between those things, we do other kinds of co-writes, and we write by ourselves as well and sort of pull those things together. And there's everything from, oh my gosh, this song just sort of happened and, it fell into our lap. We need to sing it on Sunday, to we've spent 2 years trying to figure out how to make this song work, and we just keep banging our head against a wall and maybe no one's ever going to hear it. We've had everything in between. So, that's cool. That's kind of the long and short of how I got into it, but I do very much love it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Oh, my first question, I'm sure you guys have questions too, but how do you guys decide, what was the process of deciding that writing songs was a value? Because there's a ton of worship songs out there. So what, whether it's like areas you guys are looking at in scripture or, core values of your church, I'm just curious to know how you go about or how you went about the process of deciding writing music for our congregation to sing is time well spent for us.
Totally. It's a fair question. At least at my current church at Foothills, when I was in the process of talking to them to come on staff, I had a meeting with Pastor Trent, but I already knew him personally from earlier in my life. I had no idea he had any interest in writing songs at all, though. That was news to me. Not a musician by trade. He's an excellent pastor. But so I was, he was asking me what do you like to do? What are you excited about in ministry? And I was telling him man, I really want to write songs that the church can sing and do this. And he was just like, I really want to also, but I have no idea how to make music. That's not part of his vocab. And so I think from the simplest answer I could give you is that my lead pastor is passionate about it. And so he's very much an encourager of it. He's a creative person as well. And so I think on some level there's just a value in creativity and artistic expression in the church, which is something I'm super appreciative of. But then on the flip side of that, I think there's a very much an open-handedness on the back end of these songs, as far as when we're writing these things and we're creating them, it's to capture the stories of what God is doing in our church. And so that's the home base. That's the first thing. And that always has to be the North Star. What God does with the songs after that is up to him. I'm not checking the Spotify artist page to see how many streams we have every day like I used to. Years ago, I was obsessive. I'm how many hundreds of people have listened to this, and it can be easy to get caught up in those things. And so now, like I said, the North Star is if we can capture something that was unique about what God did in our church into a song that continues to celebrate that story in other people's personal worship times or corporate worship times in our church or wherever, that's valuable because it enriches the church, I guess, as a whole, or the person who connects with that song or that story or whatever. And sometimes that person is me. Sometimes I'm the person who that song was for. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes I have to lead songs I don't even like. It's it just kind of depends. And so I think figuring out a way to put your personal preferences as far aside as you can and still create an honest expression based on what God has given you to do, that right there is the harder balance to find. Because if I made every song sound like the way I would want it to sound, it would just be one song over and over and over again. The value, I think, too, is that there are more. It's more than one person doing this. There's value in the collective expression of what God is doing in our church, and it's harder to do that when you're alone, or harder to capture it, I think, when you're alone. So I know that's not a super simple answer to your question, but it's
poured it out, and really appreciate you sharing.
So I know it's hard to talk about when they're your babies, so to speak.
Sure.
But as a church, like in a corporate setting, how do you guys decide if they're any good?
Yeah, we have a standing meeting of, I don't know, maybe 10 or so people on our team every Monday that meet to review the Sunday before and then look ahead to the one that's coming up. And in that meeting, we'll address things like that. And it's not just the worship team. This is like our lead pastor, people, at least one person-ish from just about every team. And we'll just talk about it together. Like, hey, what did you guys think? What did you see? What did you observe? And sort of take everyone's collective, input. And it's all. I'm trying to think of an example where it was never like, maybe like it wasn't super clear whether a song was hitting or not. I think for most of the time, you sort of just know what you need to know after doing the song, 3 to 6 times or so. That may not be true for every church. It's just true for ours, I think, in this season. And so we'll try it out on a Sunday. We may not, the first time we introduce a new song, we may not do the whole thing. We may just introduce part of it just to get people used to the chorus or the bridge or something like that. And then, we'll just evaluate it together as a team and talk about it and decide like, hey, is this worth continuing? Is this song dead? Does it need something to make it better? And we've encountered each one of those scenarios. And like you said, you're talking about your baby, like you made this thing and you're like proud of it. And then you have to sort of hold it up against not just a mirror, but also to everyone else as well. That takes a certain level of humility, I think, to be able to say that this art that I created is actually still an offering before and more than it's something that I created. And so as proud of the art and the expression as I can be, ultimately, if it's not bringing value to the church or if the song is somehow distracting or not good, let's not do it. That's a pretty easy win. So, I haven't encountered a time yet where I've had to like totally fight, and disagree with anybody on our team over something like that. There's definitely been some times where it was like 60-40 maybe, but not quite 50-50. So I know that day will come and we'll see what happens. But for now, it's fairly smooth and collective. So pun intended, I guess.
Nice. Yeah, I think I'm curious to and I'm sure every song is so different. So it's hard to kind of, as you were saying, talk through a formula.
Sure.
But especially singing songs in church, the theology of how and I'll say this, theology in a sense of just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean it's worth singing about.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so there's a lot of good theology, but again, not all theology I think should be talked about in music.
Or sometimes it's hard to explain in a song.
Yeah. Or sometimes
what were we saying the other day? We were a song about Job.
Yeah.
Job, my life sucks.
Yeah, which I mean,
the song "Blessed Be Your Name" is straight out of the book of Job.
Yeah,
and you give and take away is
pretty happy ring to it though.
Yes, because in spite of all this, blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah, and maybe we should definitely sing about suffering because
we may not want to sing about the destruction of the Amalekites.
Exactly.
Or, it's there are some things that are just
challenge accepted.
It's still theologically accurate, but not worth singing. Yes.
Yeah. Or there's a lot of songs that reference David and Goliath.
Sure.
But in the story of David and Goliath, we are not David. And yet most of the times when the reference is used in the song, we're David.
Right.
And so the
how much can we get away with here?
Exactly. And that is teaching people in church the wrong picture of who God is. Yeah. Because in the story of David and Goliath, David is a foreshadow to Jesus.
Right.
Right. And so he is slaying the giant, which would be Satan, the enemy, if you will. And again, it's a foreshadowing of even Genesis 3 of the fall, and the snake will strike your heel and you will crush its head. Right. So it's a all the way to Jesus. And so I think sometimes I'm just curious of, like, for you as a songwriter, how are you approaching the scripture? So one, you're teaching right theology, but also like making sure it's important.
Yeah. No, that's
because music, unlike anything else, has a way of embedding itself in the human heart.
totally.
With more power than any other form.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, so as we sort of replay these songs and sing them, they're going to be part of our heart posture. So it's something that has to be held in such balance and care.
Yeah. I've heard it said worship is sung theology. And like, I can remember words from a song 10 years old, but I can't remember the title of a sermon. I might remember ideas from a sermon.
Right.
But you're not going to recite a sermon.
Exactly.
Right.
The music has the sticking power.
Right.
And so it's so important that we are.
I would argue that it's meant to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree. I think it is such a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And so anyways.
No, I that's a great point. It's a great responsibility to make sure that what people are singing is painting an accurate picture of Jesus. I mean, that's the most important thing, you know? So I don't take that lightly. I can't in all honesty say that I've held that up as a high importance for this entire, last 10 or 15 years that I've been writing songs, but it has become more important over time for sure. And so I think the importance of making sure that, it's not that I don't have to have all of my questions answered before I enter into like songwriting, because I know that that's something God has called me to do or designed me to do or whatever, but it's that I need to be close to Jesus.
Yeah.
I need to be figuring it out with him and not without him.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's probably a lot of lonely creatives in the church who want to participate in that and want to write songs and be a benefit and be a value to their church, who get lost and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so if you're not, planted in the right stuff, like, you're not going to be creating the right things either. And so theology, for me, there's a small number of essentials and there's a very large number of non-essentials. That's at least my personal view. And so I'm at least going to do my due diligence to make sure that those essentials, if they are present in the song, that they are clear, that they're accurate, and that my church body and my pastor and my leadership teams agree, this is, we stand by this.
Yeah.
We would sing this, we love it. And it's honestly the way we treat any other worship song too. If we're going to decide to sing a song from any other church, not necessarily going to say we're not going to sing songs from this church or that church, but we're going to take the song, hold it up, yes or no. And you can sort of answer it that way. So, that might be a little bit more of a black and white way of looking at that, but it's definitely something that we try to take seriously and take good care of, is making sure that the theology that we're informing when people are singing these songs is correct and inspiring, even if you're singing about suffering. Like, there should still be hope because of Jesus, not because the song is good or catchy or whatever. So it's definitely something worth protecting.
Yeah.
Making sure that the theology is clear, it's consistent, and I think if you run into a lyric where you're like what I know what we mean to say by this, but what if it sounds like this? Do the work to figure out the lyric. Like, don't just go like, well, it sounds good, so just figure it out. And maybe it is the right decision to leave that lyric in. It might be, but
but words matter.
It matters so much.
Yeah.
It matters so much, and there's not a lot of words in a song.
Yeah.
Like, it's a small body of work, a song, and so be very protective of the words and phrases that you put in there. And if there's any lack of clarity around it, fix it.
Yeah. One thing I love that you said in your response was like the growing factor of the theology or trueness to Scripture.
Yeah.
And like I'm so grateful, especially being a teacher, for all the years that I've taught Scripture. One, the grace and mercy of God to not strike me down, because I'm sure there are things that I have said that are wrong or maybe off.
Yeah.
And just the mercy of God to help me grow to like a deeper understanding and a deeper passion for the word and a deeper passion for the things of God. And so because you're not going to start having it all figured out. And I think we are doing the church a disservice if the expectation is so high that like every song you write has to be, on the Brooke Lidgertwood, like,
right. Yeah.
It has to be that good.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just not going to happen.
It's not going to be that good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not.
Yeah.
And I guess my question, this might turn into a counseling session for me. Sorry, guys.
I love it.
If it's not going to be that good, then why sing it? Like, if we have other songs that are really freaking good.
That's kind of where I land, because it's like, unless you are crafting something that is completely unique, that hasn't been said in this way before, it's like, man, there are thousands of hymns, for example, in the history of the church, whose poetry and melody is so much more beautiful than this thing that you're trying to craft.
Yep.
It's like, why not rely on those things first? And I'm not saying everybody should sing hymns, but I'm saying there are musical expressions, there are pieces of art that are worth reviving, worth singing, worth preserving. Yeah. So I agree. If it's not going to be that good, if you're a small church and you think, man, I really would like to write a song, and the best you can come up with is something that's not really resonating, then for sure don't sing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I think that's something I actively wrestle with. I don't actually know. I don't think I'm willing to say I know anything about this yet, or can feel really confident about anything on this topic, which is why I'm so excited we're talking about it. But it definitely, I talk to so many churches on a daily basis, and it seems like a common theme, is that writing songs. And again, we only know what we've seen here in this time in history. So like, maybe this has been this way for a while, but it just seems like everybody wants to be writing music. And sometimes I'm seeing that might be turning into a distraction from the ministry that they have in front of them.
Without a doubt.
Because they're like, well, Tuesdays are songwriting days. And it's like every Tuesday, or like Tuesdays some people are literally just staff writers. That's all they do. I don't necessarily know how I feel about that, because it's kind of like, well, okay, if you're an amazing songwriter, maybe you should just go write and like not work at a church. Or maybe like I've wrestled with that, and I don't even know what to think about any of that, but it just seems like there are a few folks out there, Elevation, great example, like ton of great songs come out of that church. And it's been a huge blessing to the community of believers across the world. But does everybody play that role? And I just don't think so.
No.
But it seems like sometimes you get kind of like a Jesus juke from people, like, how come not this song? Like, why you got to be writing this song? Well, the Lord told me, or it's something our church is going through, and so like we're going to sing about it. Or sometimes it just seems like everyone in the room, it's like, what are we singing? And the worship leaders like, this is amazing. This is an incredible song.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can feel kind of cynical in that moment. That's why I wrestle with it, because I'm like, I don't know what the Lord's doing in this person or this community.
Yeah.
But like, man, How Great Is Our God's a really good song. And I like singing that song.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Do you guys ever feel that way? Does that?
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. There's several things that come to mind. I know this is a long episode, and we're just going to go for it.
Just go.
But there's a couple of things at play. I think if I know people don't think they're doing this, so I don't want to accuse people of behaving this way. But if your motivation, and you just need to check yourself, right?
Yeah.
If your motivation has anything to do with CCLI or Instagram or metrics or potential influence, and that's your reason for writing a song, I would just definitely.
I'll just say it, kick rocks.
Yeah, I would say pound sand. Yeah, it's like
go find a real job.
Well, it's because it's like we're dealing with material that is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
Yes.
To your point about theology, when we're singing about the gospel, if we're singing about the God of the universe, how dare we bring CCLI metrics into our motivation and thought process?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the reason that a song like Shout to the Lord or How Great is Our God or those songs that we love from a generation ago, the reason they hit is because they came from a place of solitary obedience and expression.
Yes.
Shout to the Lord hit because of what it was doing in the local expression of what was Hillsong Church back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that song came out the year I was born, actually.
Yeah. So
that's why they were shouting to the Lord.
That's right.
And I'm not saying, and obviously, the Hillsong thing became a music machine in a lot of ways, and integrity music and all, but throughout the process, their writers weren't thinking about, okay, we got to come up with another hit.
Yeah.
Maybe certain people turned into that, but it's like, no, it was people on their knees. I know the Passion folks, when Chris Tomlin and Christy Nockels and Matt Redman and David Crowder and all that crew was Passion Music, the weeks before conference, they were on their faces trying to come up with what can we bring to this generation at conference this year. And some of those songs that came out of that are, legendary, like the most beautiful expression of what God had for those people at that time. So, I would just, and then they became obviously CCLI and all that thing. It's like there is a music business that's a part of this, but I think if you enter into the process thinking about the music business, you're probably thinking about it the wrong way.
You're on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
And can I just say, can we not have any more songs about natural disasters? Like I felt like the mid 2000s, like 2010s, there was like floods and hurricanes and earthquakes.
Yeah. Tidal waves.
Response songs.
Tidal waves.
Yeah.
People who are in tsunamis don't think of that as an expression of God's love.
No, I don't think they
so.
do.
Let's just
let's
just make a caveat: no more natural disaster songs.
Yeah, those songs peaked at "We Are the World," and that one's not even a worship song.
We can stop at like seeing a mountain move. Like that's as far as like the nature references go. Like let's leave it at mountain moving.
I like that. I will toot your own horn though, Lance, because you said something about like, man, sometimes it's just for me, or it's just for the writing session. It's just for that time.
Yeah,
and that is okay because it is just for that time.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But like I think sometimes or at least some that I have seen, we need to look at the songs we're singing on a Sunday through a fine-tooth comb and really like dig through and like, do you actually know the verses that are being referenced of the songs that you're singing? And if you don't, then I would say personally, I think you're doing your church a disservice if you cannot reference the scriptures that these songs are getting pulled from, because to me then it's just words that we're singing. And I was scrolling on Instagram the other day and I saw a quote from Mitch Wong, who writes beautiful songs that have been sung in churches everywhere, and he was talking about songwriting and talking about how like the songs are teaching people about God, and how he tries to hold himself to that same level of a teacher that we see in the scriptures, where like I am teaching people about God. I might not be preaching a message, but the lyrics that I'm composing are teaching people about God, and there is a higher level of judgment for the teacher. And I was like, man, it's a good framework.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not a songwriter.
Woo, but
especially
especially in this world, though, because if we're in churches that sing 3 or 4 songs a week, and the average person goes to church once a month, we have less than 50 opportunities for people to express that.
Yeah.
And to be taught.
Yeah.
To express that to God.
Yeah.
So, we're just in a world where it's like we need to leverage every opportunity in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we just have to recognize we're worship leaders, so we're it's not just about what we're singing to God. We are bringing this before our congregation, and everyone's coming different walks of life. Like somebody might have just lost a child last week, or might be battling sickness, or there's so much that they could be going through, and some of these songs. There's some song, I don't want to be too specific, but there's songs it's like, can you imagine what the Lord could do with all the faith in the room?
Yeah.
So you're like, I've heard people really wrestle with that because they're like, I had all the faith. Did I not have enough faith? The Lord didn't show up for me and my family. Like I lost somebody that was near and dear to me. And then now they're not just dealing with the pain and loss of losing somebody, but then they're also trying to figure out why they poured their heart out to God in this way and it didn't feel like enough because of a song that maybe told them everything's going to be okay if you can just put your faith in him. And I understand the heart behind those lyrics and maybe like with a songwriter, but we just got to know who the audience is, like who is a part of it. And maybe they lack context, like for what's being done in just recognizing like somebody who's maybe a brand new believer and some of these songs maybe could, I don't want to say emotionally manipulate, but start to.
Well, at the very least, it could be confusing.
Yeah.
Which is not helpful.
Yeah.
It's exactly unhelpful.
Yeah.
To be confused.
Yeah, and so. I think I've just personally talked to a lot of people who really struggled with. Again, they find the Lord in the church and they worship is one of their favorite parts of Sunday because they get to be in the presence of God and worship Him in fellowship with other believers, but sometimes not taking to heart, like, man, these words are incredibly important. Like we're saying, sung theology, and we remember these songs when we go through some of the toughest times in life.
Oh yeah.
And for me, like that's why I love. I think Jeff, you were saying earlier, it's like it can be a weapon to point back to Scripture.
Yeah.
Right. And so like there's so much truth available to us in Scripture. Let's sing the Scriptures.
Yeah.
Well, I think the ones that are the songs to me that are most effective are the ones that have very little to do with I and me in the lyrics and have more to do with God's character, God's provision, God's faithfulness.
Oh, yeah.
His majesty. Like if we can, as writers, if we can, that's why How Great Is Our God is so impactful because it's not talking about me at all.
Yeah.
In fact, that's why Chris's music in general is so impactful, is because he is so conscious of not making it about us or me.
Yeah.
It's all about him.
Yeah.
So.
And if anybody out there is like, I don't think How Great Is Our God is that good of a song, go look at the CCLI charts.
Okay, it was only number 1 for every week for 3.5 years.
Chris may not be looking at the CCLI charts, but we are.
But if you look at it as a song, like as a piece of musical structure, it's not all that much.
It's not complicated.
It's not complicated. The bridge chord progression is the same as the verse and the chorus. It's like there's but it works.
Yep.
And so
I think what I love about that is that there's so much nuance to the conversation of should you write songs in your church, I think.
Yeah.
Which is the reason I was like, I don't know if I can answer that question yes or no, because those songs are doing the most like effective work, I guess you could say, of what a songwriter's trying to do with those kinds of songs. However, there are other avenues and expressions and places where songs that are different than that can still live and be a blessing to the church.
For sure.
But that's not going to work everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not, and you may not even sing those songs on Sundays.
Yeah.
A great example for me was Hillsong United has a song called Starts and Ends. It was on their People album. It's a deep cut, wasn't a single.
Great song.
Dude, it's 8 minutes. And if you played it right now, I would cry. Like, I cannot handle that song. And it's like, it's not like not necessarily a congregational song, you would say.
Yeah.
It's a lot of lyrics, but gosh, it is like, it makes me love Jesus. And so I love that all of those things can exist together, but you cannot forsake the strategy of your own local body.
Yes.
So if you are a person who feels like you want to write songs, I would say do it, but be willing to let those songs go where they need to go, even if it's nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, you just got to be willing to let that happen and let the expression of what God has placed inside you be the offering of worship, and what he does beyond that, great. Or what he doesn't do beyond that, great. Serve your people and be faithful with that, and God will handle the rest. That's not always easy. and especially, I think there's a lot of people too, probably, and I felt like this for a lot of the time, is there is a natural desire for people who end up being on stage a lot to continue to be seen and to continue to be heard. And some of that desire can certainly come from an earnest place, but it can be the fastest way to disaster as well. And so, like you mentioned earlier, you just have to be faithful and humble with what you have, and not be so determined to achieve something other than building the kingdom of God. There just cannot be anything else before that. And so, do I get that right every day? Absolutely not. And do I go into every songwriting session like totally willing to be like humble with it? I wish I could say yes, but no, I don't. But I'm learning, and I'm trying to do that, and I'm trying to be as faithful with what's in my hands as possible. And God has given me this assignment for this particular body of believers. And so, however I can capture and translate what God is doing through me and through these people together collectively, and we can all celebrate it together, if that's the only thing I do with my life, I'm in good shape.
Yeah.
So
that's well said.
I can't get away from that.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Man, I really appreciate you sharing. It's an awesome discussion.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back.
Leaving a little
You're
convicted
just down the
too.
road. Leaving a little convicted.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
What are you convicted by?
Yeah, share with us. Let everybody know.
You know, I said something about not knowing every verse, or not knowing the verses in every song that we sing, and in a little self-reflection, I was like, okay, my church, do I know? And I was like, no, I don't.
How many songs do you guys have in rotation?
I'll pull it up.
He'll know. My guess would probably be like 30 would be my guess.
We have 30 to 40 at any given time.
But like, yeah, even the songs we sang this last week, like I don't know all the scripture references.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I got some studying to do. I got some work to do.
So
we got like 30.
Yeah.
Here's an annoying thing. As a production person, so annoying about my church. And I'm sorry for you guys who are listening, who are from my church. As a production person, it is so frustrating because for every song, every slide, there's the lyric, and then at the bottom of the screen is a scripture reference.
That's so good.
For every song. As a production person, I hate it.
Yeah.
As a Jesus follower, I love it.
That's great.
Because they do care about being theologically accurate and only singing songs that are supported by scripture.
That's really cool.
So
Why is that not done enough? Is that an old person thing? Like,
That's a lot of work.
is that
That's
It's
a
a lot of
lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Well, I'm just saying, like, is that something that like people did before I was born, like really frequently?
I don't think so. But
I'm just saying, like, why don't I see that enough?
They're on the overhead projectors, just all the scripture references.
if you look in a hymnal, if you look at an old, like the Red Bound Baptist hymnal or the Hymns for the Family of God hymnal or any of those old hymnals, typically you would see, some of where this came from.
Even if you go to multitracks.com to buy the stems for something, even they go through the trouble of listing scripture references.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they're consulting people about that or they're just digging up their own. But
Even
It's
there,
super helpful.
Which is super, it is.
That's actually very helpful.
It is extremely helpful.
Yeah.
Like, I love
I will
that.
say that
It made
for-
the work a lot easier for me.
Exactly.
But for my church, there are songs that some people would really like to sing that we don't sing because it's not supported in the same way. So it's like, I was joking about it being frustrating, but
sorry, Grace Church.
My production brain doesn't like seeing it up there.
Yeah.
But
and then you realize
I love knowing that they care enough to actually be that specific.
It's really intentional accountability. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's there's so many songs that I think are absolute bangers to play. They sound awesome. They're super fun.
And the lyrics are just crap.
And they just suck. The songs in Nate and I've had these conversations in our church where I'm like, dude, this song, like, what do you think of this? Or I'll send it to you and Josh and it'll just be crickets. Like, yeah, this song kind of sucks, dude. Like, yeah, you're right. You're totally right.
It's good for your personal devotion.
I just really, it's just like that. Some things musically can be awesome. Two things can be true at once.
Yep.
Yeah.
Musically, it can be a killer song, and it can not be theologically accurate.
So add it to your workout mix.
Yeah, exactly. Add it to my workout mix. That's a whole other conversation.
And the inverse can be true.
Yeah.
I've heard songs that have great, well-written lyrics, but the music was so bad.
Yeah.
It was just like, oof.
Well, and that's earlier you said something like, there's some songs I have to lead, but I don't like them.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, he's going to get roasted in the comments because there's people out there like, you should love every worship song, but you're totally right.
Oh, how can I do that?
How can I do that? The lyrics might be true, but like the song musically is
and that's
just
an important distinction. I would never lead a song that I don't think is theologically sound.
Yeah.
But I will lead songs that I don't personally like or enjoy or wouldn't just go listen to because I wanted to listen to them.
Yeah.
I have to do that all the time. And I'm not going to say what they are on mic, but
I mean, all of us have to deal with that.
Of course.
Mixing for Tomlin every night, there were songs in the set list that I didn't like.
Sure.
But I look over to the side and there's somebody in tears because it's their favorite song.
Bingo.
Yeah.
It's like,
bingo. And I've been wrong
and I'm going,
so many times
this
about
is
songs.
not, you talk about deep cuts. It's like, this is track 11 whatever seat. It's like, this is buried for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Sorry, Chris.
I love it.
There's been so many just humbling moments where going into a weekend, you're like, oh, seriously? Like that song?
Yeah.
And then you're playing it, and then in the second row, there's a mom by herself crying,
weeping.
and I'm like, oh, Lord.
And there have also been moments in my life where a song that I didn't care for, something happens in your life, and all of a sudden it resonates.
It means something different to you.
I hate this song. Why am I crying?
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a moment like that with Goodness of God, which everybody knows that song now and loves it for good reason. And I've played it and sang it a bunch of times. And then it was last year, I got to go up to Chicago and play bass with my brother-in-law and my sister at their church. And we played the song. And for no reason that I could explain, all of a sudden I was just like totally stuck in the lyrics of that bridge. And I was like in tears, which I don't like cry on stage like super often. That doesn't happen a ton. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've thought about these lyrics, but there was something different about it that I lingered on it. Like I couldn't
There's a
move
circumstance
off of it.
where it's like, okay, God's goodness is running after me. Like that's a compelling piece of poetry.
Yeah.
It's like, if there's something going on in your life where you need that, it's like, yeah, please catch me.
Man, yeah.
It's like,
and maybe I did need it that day. I can't remember exactly when that was now, but I just remember like that moment of feeling the Spirit of God in a song that I'd sing 1,000 times, And I love that. There's something that will never go away with those songs. Like we said earlier, some of those songs are just meant to be legendary.
Yeah.
But not every song has to be.
I just don't want people to write dumb songs.
Stop writing dumb songs. We don't know if you should write songs in church or not. I love black and white answers. We just don't have one here, but stop writing dumb songs.
Whatever you do, don't write dumb ones.
Yeah, just don't write dumb songs.
Can I give it one like succinct answer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Here we go. If you feel like you want to write songs for your church, go tell somebody at your church that you want to do that, and then be willing to submit to the opportunities that are there for you. If you can do it, I think you should try, but be willing to be humble with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fair.
That's good.
And just be okay if somebody tells you your song sucks.
You have to be okay with that. It's the only, you have to be okay with that. You'll
And you know
never
what?
be,
Here's the-
And stop asking your mom.
Here's the hard reality, though.
my mom loves every song I've ever written.
The hard reality.
She's a good mom.
Yes, sir.
But the hard reality is that it probably will suck.
Yes.
Because
yes.
crafting a song is one of the most difficult pursuits you can even think of.
It's maddening.
And so, to link poetry that's actually not just theologically correct, but interesting and poetic with music, it's like your attempt at taking these great Beatles changes and an 8th grader's best attempt at poetry. It's like, of course it's going to be bad.
Of course. You're exactly right.
The Beatles part was probably great.
Yes.
Gosh, we could go forever, because I'm just thinking back, like there's days where I was like, I'm tired of singing this song. It's just so boring. Have you ever said, like, I'm tired of reading scriptures. They're just becoming boring.
When I'm in Numbers.
Yeah.
Honesty is the best policy. I like that.
You know what I mean, though? Like there's some, I just repackaging, reframing a little bit to recognize, like, if these songs are becoming boring to sing, so you're like, we need to write new ones because these ones aren't good enough. You might, there's something there to address. Because I know for myself there was. Really what it came down to is I just didn't like the chord progression.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I didn't care a whole lot about what the words were.
Yeah.
And somehow that's the one that gets stuck in your head.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Single.
So like,
Well, that's okay.
we made
Case study. So we, everyone knows this is Amazing Grace, and it got over-synthed, right? And
oh my gosh.
and we started singing it in church, slowed down, and like, I remember Spence pulled it out, and I was weeping over the lyrics. And again, a song I've heard millions of times.
But you slowed it down, you
played it
lingered
millions
with
of
it.
times.
Yeah.
And it just kind of stripped everything away. It was just the lyric, and it just rocked. And I was like, this song, it's gold. It just got over-synthed.
Because
And
a
it
good
just-
song
yeah.
is a good song is a good song.
That's
Yeah.
right.
If it doesn't work, like How Great Is Our God, it was born out of Chris with his guitar by himself in his bedroom singing this little chorus. If it works that way, then it's going to work huge with the African Children's Choir behind him and whatever else. It's like, I was there, man.
That was awesome.
It's just so subtle. African children's choir. Yeah. Well, no, it's a total cut.
But I remember hearing that version.
Yeah, dude.
The international
Same.
version,
Yeah, because you always tell the story about you and Chris. I think it was it on that trip you get in Africa and all these people are saying how great is our God, and you're like,
and he was wrecked.
Yeah. He's like, what?
Because he's like, how did this little chorus from my bedroom make its way to this little village?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Literally half a world away.
Look at you, little white man. You sing a good song.
That's actually what their choir director said.
That's like, and that's how you can see those pure moments in somebody, when they're so just jaw dropped. How could this have happened?
Yeah.
It just proves when he was writing that song, it wasn't like, how do I get the kids in Africa singing this one?
No, of course not.
Absolutely.
And like the band Blue Tree that wrote God of the City.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're in a brothel in Thailand.
Yeah.
And they walked in, they were trying to find a place to play music. They go into this bar, basically, and the guy says, yeah, you can play. And they're like, great, nobody will understand the words anyway because nobody speaks English. So they just start playing their songs, and then they see what's happening around them. And all of a sudden, he's like, greater things are yet to come, greater things are still to be done in the city. And it just, for 20 minutes, they just sang over what was happening around them. And it became this worship song that was born out of this just horrible situation. So, I mean, with things like that happen,
desire.
What?
And a very honest desire
to see
just like the change
to see
that
the
they're singing
change,
about.
to see what God could do in this circumstance. And so,
gosh, that's really cool. I didn't
when
know that
moments
story.
like that happen, it's like, man, that has to be what God is doing.
Without a doubt.
Motives matter.
Totally.
Yeah.
Motives matter.
And recognizing that, like, we all have a little bit of narcissism in us.
100%.
And so when we're writing music, sometimes we got to be really honest about ourselves.
Is this about me or is this not?
Is this about me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or is this actually for my church,
Yeah.
for my body of believers that I'm a part of? And it's like, so cool stories like that. I think as believers, sometimes we get so fixated on trying to recreate those moments.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And so it's like, well, look what that happened. Like, so our generation needs to come up with something. It's just, the motivation absolutely matters.
Yeah.
So
if I tried to write like every song for my church thinking like, how can I how can I find a give me faith out of this?
Yeah.
Like I'll never be closer to it than further away.
Yeah. And what does that do with your relationship with the Lord and the process and the whole thing, you know? So it's like, anyways, all right. Well,
it's a long conversation.
There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot I learned here.
Yeah.
Me too.
A lot I learned. We could probably have 3 or 4 more of
This
these.
is my favorite thing in the world. So
this is what happens when we bring a worship leader on the podcast. We're going 2 hours.
Yeah.
Well,
he's got us talking.
I love it. Seriously, thank you guys for having me. And I'm super, super excited to see what the MxU worship stuff continues to become, because I think that's an untapped space that needs more value added to it. And you guys are right in the right spot.
So does that mean you're going to start using it?
I'd love to.
Yeah, we'll hold you accountable to that.
Let's do it.
Cool. Well,
thanks as always for joining us. We can't wait to see you next time. This has been great.
Yeah,
man.